So that's ultimately why we went with him and moved away from it after the epilepsy incident. And I went back on a search after the incident, and I spent three and a half years searching before I ended up linking up at that in that 3.5 year time period. I linked up with a gentleman named Pilar Rivera III. It's a former kennel of Connie Diavolo. Connie Diavolo is no longer actively breeding. Um, that gentleman, we struck up a deal. We ended up purchasing an import bitch together, along with a third partner. Um, she was bred to an Italian stud, an Italian dog from Puglia, Italy. Let me rephrase that. Puglia is the correct pronunciation. Puglia. Puglia. Pronounced Puglia. Um, a gentleman called Maurizio Marziali, who has his own bloodline in Italy that's been preserved for at least 6 generations. Uh, After those six generation productions, he's got a little bit of Campagno, which is Bocci, Michele Bocci. Um, he's got Campagno in there. He's got a little bit of dogs from Dr. Flavio Bruno. And of course, dogs going back to Dr. Breber's dogs, Plud and Tipsy, and all that jazz. And then, of course, there is a smidgen amount of derium in there because back in the day, 6, 7 generations back, you didn't have access because, quote unquote, it was a uh, dying breed that was in recovery. There wasn't a lot of breeders out there. So, of course, people were intermixing. And then, of course, there's a little bit of derium in there uh, by the way of Chino, which lines up where lines up with my pedigree and my DNA on my dogs. My One of my Italian imports from that particular litter from that bitch that we imported. Oh, let me pull this up. This is WP Maui di Marziali Diavolo. This was our F1. Okay, so for those individuals out there that don't understand the F series meaning, F1 is your foundation. So we'll use the Barone to Africa breeding. Africa was our F0. Barone was our F0. We put the two together, creating our first batch of F1s when that litter was born May 25th, 26th of 2018. Those are all F1s in combination for both myself, Pilar, and Will Shackelford, the third individual that was in with us. Now, I had Maui tested through Embark, and he is authentically Cane Corso. There is no precedent in his bloodlines. I will be testing his niece, and I will also be testing one of his daughters as well. But the breed makeup that was showed to me via Embark genuinely lines up with his pedigree. Okay, so we're going to start at the lowest percentages. He has 6.8 box, 6.8% box, 7.7% bull mastiff, 31.5% Neapolitan mastiff, which I anticipated all of these based off of his pedigree, and 54% Cane Corso. That's a lot higher than other people's, to my knowledge, percentage. So let me delve a bit onto the breed itself. And yes, I'm going to say breed and not a band dog or type, because people need to apply basic science 101. In genes, we have what is called a haplotype. They are what establishes a Rottweiler as a Rottweiler, a Great Dane as a Great Dane, a Neapolitan as a Neapolitan, and a Cane Corso as a Cane Corso. Each dog has its own unique haplotype. when it's got many different haplotypes in said dog, obviously it is a mix and it's genuine. You cannot change haplotypes. That is how a breed is established, is by that defining feature, the haplotypes. Now, can you get varying percentages? We'll use a quick DNA and breeding analogy 101. You take we'll say you take a Basset Hound and you put it to an Australian cattle dog. Okay. Each of those are well-established breeds, have their own specific phenotype, the whole nine. You put those two together. Genuinely, the original thought process is you got a 50-50 cross. That's not how DNA works. You could have 64% and then the remaining DNA be 64% Basset and then the remaining DNA be cattle dog, or vice versa. The DNA, how it lines up, you're going to have a little bit more than the other. Okay, plain and simple. But to keep follow the KISS method, those of you out that don't know what the KISS method is, just simply look it up. You take those two and you get your first 50-50 cross. And if you put it back to one of those breeds, you're going to get a 3/4 cross. Now, it's going to be a little bit of plus or minus. Famous Italians words, plus or minus. Italians are big on using plus and minus. More, it's basically more or less is what they say. More or less. It's the same with a DNA. You're going to have more or less. It really depends. But genuinely, via a regular thought process, you got a dog at 75%, whatever it is you used. Going back into breeding, I have been very selective on my phenotypic traits, my DNAs, to improve the more amount of Corso DNA to follow my saying. If you get a little bit, you can get 100%. So I took and I bred Maui to an inbreeding, and I can't wait to see what the DNA outcome is of those dogs, because I did an inbreeding with him to his niece, and I'm going to get his niece tested because it is off of Maui's sister and my stud Rex, who has main American lines, to my Italian import female that I kept out of that 2018 litter. And the reason for me moving from American to more traditional Italian lines is due to the fact, first and foremost, the brains, okay, which I discovered later on down the road. I'll touch that in a few minutes. The American lines are very hot, very dog aggressive. You can't really run them in a pack style environment with American dogs. It's non-conducive. It's like sticking two game dogs together and expecting them to be best buds. It's not going to happen. I have to run my Corsos in pairs, usually opposite sex, so male and female. I do have a couple that I can run together. Like I have a couple of males that I can run together with a female, provided that female's not in heat. When the female's in heat, they get alternated. I avoid confrontations with them so that they don't get a bad blood, because Corsos, for some reason, once they get that bad image in their head, it's a wrap. That dog's done for. They're going to try and kill that dog the rest of their life. It's no different than when they don't like a person. If you got an individual that's been teasing them or poking and prodding or abused them, etc., they're going to remember that. I don't know how to quote it other than with the analogy of a mule. Corsos are very, very much like a mule. They remember all the bad over the good. They still remember the good, but they'll remember the bad quicker. I'll give you an example. I had a guy break into my house when I lived in New York, and one of my females, Ruby, bit this individual because I sent her after him, and she bit him because he was breaking into my house. He was halfway in, and I shut the window on him, kind of deal. And I sent my dog on him to teach his ass a fucking lesson not to be breaking and entering. Long story short, guy gets arrested, does his time, gets out. We're at a community event. It was a local car show. And she remembered this guy and was great the entire event. As soon as she seen this guy, off like a bottle rocket, barking, hooting and hollering, carrying on, trying to get at this guy. And as soon as we got away from him, she calmed right down. As soon as we got away from him, she calmed right back down, back to the normal dog. They got memories. These dogs got long memories, especially with mules. But the reason she remembers this guy is because this guy kicked her something fierce to cause her to yelp, and that's when she really lit him up. So back to the analogy of the mule, they remember more bad than over the good kind of deal. They still remember the good, but they remember the bad first and foremost. So, when it comes to my program selection, this is one of the brains traits that I look for, is the ability to independently think like this, which is something that's been prided upon in many ancient writings, because I've got two of the oldest books for the breed. I've got both Il Cane Corso books. The book by Fernando Casalini and Gandolfi, Stefano Gandolfi and Fernando Casalino, as well as Dr. Flavio Bruno's Il Cane Corso book. To get into there, let me grab my book. So, see, there's one of my books. This one is by Dr. Flavio Bruno. And for those out there that want an educational, I'll have to post a picture, send you a picture of this, Sean. But for those out there, Cantando del Molise is where you can purchase this book from. If it's American, you're looking at about $110 American, and approximately 2 to 3 month wait time. After it's received, you'll have to contact Cantando del Molise, and they'll set everything up. But it's right around $110 US is the conversion to euros, I do believe. It's right around $110. That's what I paid. Everybody that I've sent over there, it's been the same price. But it's very hard. It takes a while to get these printed out because she doesn't keep a lot of printed books in stock. She's got to have them printed, and then she ships them once she receives them from the print company. And that is one of Dr. Flavio Bruno's direct breeders / preservationists, Dr. Francisca Padania. So she's the owner of the Cantado del Molise. All right. There is a lot of historical documentation in this book, and this book is both Italian and English. Okay. It's one side of the page is Italian transcript. The other half of that same page is English transcript, so that you can read along with and see exactly what they're talking about, where they're talking about. But to speak on the age of the Cane Corso, these books have many referencing back into the 1500s and later for the Cane Corso. You don't hear that kind of talk when it comes to the Neapolitan, which is a huge debate amongst the community of what come first, either the Neapolitan or the Cane Corso. These books provide that documentation of that. Show where those historical documents and citations are found. Those poems, poetic eddas, however you want to pronounce it, mentioning Cane Corsos. No mention of Neapolitan Mastino. So with that being said, the breed that I got into, I've been actively breeding 15 years. This year is 15, started in 2010. Will I ever stop? At some point, yes. Eventually I'll retire, but one of my kids will take on. Most likely middle boys is deciding that they're wanting to pursue the canine arts, and that's exactly what I call it, is the canine arts, because they're getting into IPO, Schutzhund, and weight pulling. Those are the two fields that they're getting in real heavily, and then they want to branch out here next year after we get moved. They want to branch out back into hog hunting and go back to roots, which is where ultimately we're trying to go back, is to our roots, because our Italian bloodlines are very old older bloodlines that are more geared towards traditional purposes. Everybody follows into this fallacy of this is the original Roman war dog, and it's not. Um, you got to stop and think about what happened before. That will bring us back to our roots, because I will get back into hog hunting again, uh, and be using my dogs quite frequently, which gets us back to our roots, gives my son an opportunity to go back to my roots and start hog hunting, um, with dogs versus, going out and doing his average gun hunting, because he's never been hog hunting with dogs before. Um, so he's anticipating that and looking forward to that, just like we are. Uh, right now, we do traditional work, herding and droving with our dogs. We have goats. We've had pigs in the past, chickens, rabbits. Gives us an ability to work our dogs because we're going to need to move said livestock. And believe it or not, that was one of the traditional purposes. I want to say there's a photo floating around in the Cane Corso forums on Facebook of a brindle dog in the middle of Italy, and it's in the middle of a large city with I want to say it was a flock of sheep. It's either a flock of sheep or a herd of goats, one of the two. But it's clearly a brindle dog in the photo, even though it's a black and white photo. It's clearly a brindle dog. You can clearly see it in there. But it's labeled as a Cane Corso. Um, I want to say it was from the 1950s, maybe early 1960s. And they're in the middle of the city, and they're droving. I mean, they're not doing the same thing like you would see border collie or cattle dog doing, because those are actual herding breeds. Okay, the Cane Corso is a droving breed. They're meant to keep the flock together and slowly push them forward or in the direction that you want. They're not geared to be quick like a true herding dog. Yes, they are quick. I mean, it's right there in the breed standards. If you look at all of the breed standards for the breed, it's supposed to have cat-like movement. Their presence alone is what pushes the animal. That's what I found is the most effective is when you are looking for a Cane Corso to use for herding. Their presence alone is what pushes the animal. And they also have to be non-volatile. Like one of my females, I got a Tigrado female. As a matter of fact, it was that Uncle Denise breeding. It's the female to it's the niece there, the Maui. She's got a very level head. That particular dog has a presence about her where all she has to do is walk towards my goats, and they will go the direction naturally that she wants. And all she's got to do is move slightly if she wants to adjust. If I want them penned up in a corner, she keeps them penned up in a corner. All based off of a look in her body language. They know she means business. She's only had to nip the goats once, maybe twice, in the entire 4 years that we've had goats. There's only been 2 actual nips on the goats, and it was warranted because the buck was pushing her and trying to bully her and get his way. And she nipped him on the face, hit him in the nose, and he got the point real quick. Stop fucking with her. There's no other way to describe it. Is they literally, goats can be a very pushy animal, just like sheep. Pigs are even worse. I'll give you a good example where I needed a good bay dog. My F2 production from 2017, which was WP Moana. We were in a process of building a new pig barn, and I had to remove the pig fencing to get up in there and put the wood on the exterior. Pigs kept coming in, harassing us, grabbing our air gun cord, put holes in our air gun cord multiple times. because pigs by nature are very curious and they're very mouthy kind of creature. And so they were late cut, so they were still feeling their oats and were pretty cantankerous to humans being in their pen and invading their space. So they would come up and they would nip at your boots, grab your pant legs, and the whole nine. Uh, and ultimately, it required me to bring in Mo to cover our ass, basically. She would come in and push the pigs back and keep them off of us so we could work. And she did this phenomenally. There was one instant where our one pig, Winston, challenged her to the point where he went after her, and she grabbed right a hold of his nose and let him have it 6 ways from Sunday. The other pigs come rushing in, and then of course I had to bring in two of my other dogs to help with that situation because they tried to gang up on Mo, and I wasn't having pigs gang up because that's one thing they don't understand. Most people don't understand. Pigs can be quite dangerous, especially when you're running them in packs, little herds, 2, 3, 4, 5. If a person gets down, the average time consumption for a human to be consumed by a pig is 8 minutes, teeth and all. The only thing that can't be digested by the pig is the teeth and their toenails. Anything with keratin, they cannot digest. So everything else they can digest, bones, the whole freaking nine. Amazing garbage disposals, absolutely amazing garbage disposals, but you need to have a healthy respect for these creatures. Just like with the Cane Corso, you need to have a healthy respect for the breed itself. It is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the one-time buyer kind of deal that, hey, look, I'm new to the breed. It's not for beginners. This is a very dominant breed. If you don't put in the time, they will wreck shop. Plain and simple. They will wreck shop. You need to have experience with large breeds, more specifically guardian breeds. And even then, when I say guardian breeds, I'm looking at mastiff breeds. You need to be familiar with any of the mastiff subspecies, okay? Which, if anybody delves into the mastiff subspecies, it's huge. You have Great Danes in there. You have Borbles in there. You have Alapaha bulldogs that are now classified as a type of molosser. Neapolitan, Cane Corso, which, if you take a look at all the mastiff subspecies, the Cane Corso is the lightest of all of those. They're also supposed to be smallest. So if you're seeing 160 plus pound dogs, or better, pushing 200 pounds, that's a no-no. Ideal range that I personally like to see is 115 to 130 pounds. It's ideal. I do have the occasional production that is 150s, and that is, I have noticed a trend is those individuals out there that have these pups from me that are 150 plus pounds. The dogs, to me, in my opinion, are obese. They are overweight. They are not at a cut weight. There is no tummy tuck definition like there should be. To me, they're obese. It's like a flat line looking across instead of seeing a nice little definition between their chest and their stomach. There should be a nice transition, a nice little wave up. Nothing too extreme, but enough that you can see, at least this much, inch to 2 inch definition between the chest and the stomach. Ideally, in my opinion, for what a Cane Corso should look like. They should not be straight across. There should be a tummy tuck in there. Just like there should be when you're taking a look at their spine and you're taking a look at their back when you're evaluating their back. A lot of these new standards will use AKC, for example. The standard that they got out is supposed to be flat, straight across. I don't agree with that. What I agree with is a slight little bit of a hump curvature and then going down into the croup, and a nice gentle rolling hump, just enough to where you can see the spine come up and down. Okay. Those dogs, compared to a dog with a straight flat back have more spinal flexion, and 9 times out of 10, those dogs with that little bit of a curvature have the cat-like movement, while versus the dogs that are completely flat, straight across the back, they're very stiff. Those dogs that with what I call a flat back versus a nice back, they're very stiff. When they're moving, it's like they're moving on stilts. There's not that spinal flexion and fluidity as they're coming along. I don't know how to explain it other than it to me, it's like watching a horse with stifle issues. They got back issues. They don't have enough flexion in their spine to promote the fluidity. They're walking on stilts. Or in the case when you're trotting a dog out, it's like they're trotting on stilts. Instead of seeing that little bit of flexion in there, it's straight. You don't see any flexion compared to these dogs with this slight curvature where they got that flexion. Not only are they quicker on their feet, I've also noticed that they're much more agile and faster than the dogs with the flat back. So that's another trait that I focus on within my program is making sure that I've got a slight curvature to the spine for proper flexation. Not to the extent of where you see this dog, it's like deformed. But you take a look at a dog and say, hey, look, that's a really nicely put together dog. I've got pictures for days on my kennel website. I do have 2 kennel pages. One is inactive. The last post on there you'll see is my goats. And then I got another, they're on Facebook, mind you. The other kennel page is my active one. I'll have to send Sean a link so that he can attach that in the video. You can see some of these photos and you can see the fluidity in the videos where you see the movements of these particular dogs, especially my particular productions, because I post my productions, what's in my lineage comparatively, and I'm almost 4 generations in, 15 years, hand select breeding, lots of testing, in general, lots of testing. And no, I'm not talking about OS and hip, etc. I'm talking in general. My dogs go under a rigorous test, performance tests, to be precise, performance tests. If my dogs can't do some type of job, they don't get bred. If they've got, and in that performance of that job, whether it be herding or hunting, it's going to show whether or not they got weak hips, weak elbows, etc., weak patellas, weak mind. Especially if I test them on pigs, you got to have a dog with a very strong mindset, because I have noticed a lot of American dogs are more timid and intimidated easily compared to the Italian dogs. Because I have both on my yard. I've had both on my yard the entire time. I can do the comparative analysis between the two and say, okay, yeah, I have more temperament issues with my American lines. So to fix this, we put some Italian in there to try and fix that. I have noticed my Italian dogs are more confident. They have more poise, more confidence. They handle exposure a lot better without detriment compared to some of my full American productions. When I say exposure, we'll use gunfire. We'll use a bottle with rocks inside that you shake when they're a baby. Expose them all to this little stuff. When you go to feed, we usually have, when we have our pups here, we have a little playground that they've got to run through. That's got everything from hills, like little climbing platforms that you got to get on, that you got to jump down from, different textures. There's a little box of cans, and I've got another little box of plastic bottles, and I got hanging cans and bottles that they got to run through to give them that exposure, that environmental stimuli, to expose them to different environments. And then, of course, I start my shots at 4 weeks old, so they get their first set of 5-way shots at 4 weeks, excuse me, and then usually by 7 weeks they're ready for their second shot. And that's when I start taking them places and exposing them to different environmentals, teaching them to load up, getting into a car is good, start working with their leash work. And then by the time they're 15 weeks, they're pretty much bomb-proof dogs. They've already gone through all of this. And my clients pick their dogs up, they go out, they go on a walk immediately, don't have any issues. 3.5 to 4 weeks is the most crucial learning period when they start learning things. 3.5 weeks is when they start crawling from the nest to defecate. They start learning, hey, look, we don't poop in the nest, we don't pee in the nest. So they start crawling to other areas to do their business. That's the time, that's the utmost time when you start seeing that. Start taking them outside. 9 times out of 10, that dog is going to virtually, by the time it's 15 weeks, be almost 100% house trained, because it's going to learn that going outside is where it does its business, because that is the crucial time period where their brain absorbs the most. Young puppies are very absorbing, and that is also where they learn 90% of their fear behaviors. So if you can get them through those fear behaviors at an early age, it makes adulthood 10 times simpler, especially when it comes to environmental stimuli and exposure. I've noticed more of my American dogs do not handle those environment. They handle it much slower, and you've got to be extremely careful. Otherwise, you ruin that dog to certain environmental stimuli if you push them too much. Versus the Italian dogs, they can handle that famous analogy of plus or minus. They've got more flexibility in their brain. They're more forgiving, that they can bounce back quicker, first and foremost. And they also handle the stimuli better. So I have noticed over a period of time, with the more Italian blood that I've infused into my program, I'll give you an example. I have F3s that are 3/4 Italian bloodlines with 1/4 American bloodlines. And those dogs, I'll give you an example. Roxy, one of my 2023 productions from that particular litter, virtually off-leash trained herself. She is that smart. She does not leave our side. I take her out in the woods, take her out with me fishing, the whole nine, hunting. She does not leave my side. She is very owner-oriented, first and foremost. Second off, very obedient. If I tell her to plots, she plots immediately. She's got a brain on her. If I tell her sit down, stay, come, she listens. Her leash work, I had never done any leash work with her, period. Put her on a leash, she fought it once, and then realized I wasn't trying to harm her, and now she walks perfectly on a leash. Well, that's a lot of people, they don't talk about this with the Corsos. With true Corsos, they're supposed to have a double coat. They shed, they do, year round. And a lot of people don't realize that, because a lot of breeders out there have bred out the double coats. So they're only seeing single coat dogs that are smooth like an APBD coat. Okay, it's very smooth. It's not that double coat that you can clearly see. With bringing back in the Italian production, I have brought back in the double coat in my bloodlines, whereas my American dogs were solely single coat with the occasional double coat popping on occasion, versus bringing in the Italian back in the line, and it's damn near every pup in that litter has a double coat. These are things that breeders out there, they really need to look for. Like they're trying to breed to a lack of better terms, to a standard, whether it is their standard or it is the breed standard. With me, it's a culminating of multiple events between historic writings, guidance from original preservationists like Dr. Flavio Bruno. We've had deep conversations about the breed, about my registry, and got his approval on everything. Like I've run down on how I've done my breeding program with Dr. Bruno, and showed him the morphology from where we got our first start with solid American lines till we got into. I've got two sets of lines on my program. I've got a UKC program and I've got an AKC program. I showed him both lines, and he goes, "Look, now you need to influence that Italian stuff into your UKC lines, and once you get that more heavily influenced in there, you'll see a lot of these traits." I've got a female in one of my F3 productions. She's only half Italian. Looks like there's an old photo. I want to say it's either Champion Duro, or Champion Orso, one of the two. When I say champion ortho, I'm talking about Orso Bala, which was an ICCF original Versatility dog, if I'm not mistaken. Both of these dogs are original Versatility dogs. She is the spit and image of that particular dog. Only difference is she's black brindle instead of a classic chestnut brindle with no masking. Here's another example. I've noticed with a lot of American breedings that have heavy original U.S. Foundation bloodlines tend to have no masking gene in their brindles. Their masking gene is not there. So you'll pop out actual, authentically true, solid brindles with minimal to no white. That's a rarity. You don't see that kind of color production done on a regular basis. Just like you do not see the straw, but you'll see, depending on the American bloodline, you'll see black and tan, blue and tan, or red and tan. I've never seen straw come out of American lines. Personally, that's not to say that it has not happened. I do know, though, in my Italian productions, my personal experience, especially with my 3/4 minimal influence of American lines, including my observations of other breeders, overseas directly in Italy, I have seen only 1 or 2 breeders produce a blue and tan, black and tan in Italy. But in retrospect to that, Sasha, her brains very quick. She fully house trained herself at around 13 weeks. Just one day she started heading to the door, and it's been nonstop ever since then. She'd head to the door and she would scratch the door at 13 weeks to be let outside, saying she had to go potty. Her sit, her come, she's one of the few dogs that I have that I do not genuinely have to use an e-collar on. Her recall is on point. All of her commands are damn near on point. She could use a little work on her sitting down command because I don't use it very often anymore. But when we're working, that's all she wants to do is work. She's got that drive. That's all she wants to do is push our goats and move them around the pen like when I ask her to or put them in a corner and keep them in a corner. Like, her drive to work. She has clearly passed that on to her pups. All the pups from her first litter, because I did not. She's one of my 2021 productions, F2 productions. We did not breed her till 2023, and I was actually going to wait a year before we bred her, but I decided to breed her ahead of schedule because, first and foremost, she has a maturity about her. She can go 0 to 60 at any given time when I want her to, but the moment I turn her off, she turns into a lazy couch potato. Like, calms right down. You don't have any issues, and that's a key factor that I need in my dog. I got to be able to turn them on and then turn them off. It's like a little light switch. You flip it on, they're going, they need to work, then you shut it off. They calm right down and turn right back into a great family companion. We'll use this as an example. Coonhounds. You can turn them on all day long, but there's that rare one out there that you can turn off and they turn into the greatest family companion. They come right back after they know the job's done. You got to weigh your pros and cons and then breed it to a really good specimen that you've got access to in order to produce the next best generation, which is exactly what I did. Is I went with the best specimens available at that point in time to produce Moana, which happened to be one of my F1 productions from 2014 that I bred. It was a line breeding, matter of fact. It was a line breeding, go figure. Auntie to nephew, line breeding. So Moana's mom was the half sister to my foundation female Tasha. Came from the same facility, Jamco. You know, it's the same courtesy that I'm extending. Hey, look, these are your productions. I want you to see them. You know, get a feel for what you're producing, how it's progressed as it's matured. It's been a long time getting to this avenue. 15 years getting to a point where I damn near have virtually my own bloodline. I have several breedings that I have basically lined up. I just haven't pulled the trigger on, which will create 4 generational productions. So 4 generations in that pedigree are all me. 4 generations. Are they 4 complete generations? No. It's 4 generations, and you see it whether it comes through the maternal line or the matriarchal line. You'll see 4 generational productions that are all my work, and eventually I'll have a full pedigree stacked. It takes time. It's not an overnight process to get a pedigree like that. I mean, even if you were to take and breed at a registry's minimum guidelines, we'll use AKC, which is 13 months for females and then 9 months for males. Even if you're breeding at those minimum guidelines, you're not guaranteed to have a pedigree established before 7 years. It, on average, takes an individual 7 years to establish their own bloodline, minimum. Some people classify 7 generations, but I disagree with that. If you can produce 4 generations in a pedigree, that's all your work. And eventually, as time progresses, that entire pedigree will be nothing but your name, your dogs, your productions, etc. And it is absolutely necessary to bring in the occasional outcross. Absolutely necessary to bring in genetic diversity so that you're not inbreeding or line breeding too much and starting to bring out negative traits. I'm a big firm believer in that. Every few generations, you got to outsource, bring in new genetics that work with your program.
What I gather is that your big thing with the Italian dogs compared to the American lines is, first off, the temperament. You feel like the dogs have a more solid foundation and their temperament is more aligned with what you're looking for on your yard. And I think you kind of mentioned health wise. Is that something?
That's the other thing is health in the Italian dogs is much different. You don't The American lines that I've noticed are really heavily ridden with cancer. First and foremost, cancer is the number one killer for American line kind of Corsos. Most specifically, osteosarcoma. Okay. Second off, cardio issues. Third off, dysplasia. Those are the 3 common issues that I've noticed in American lined dogs. Those are the 3 most prevalent issues health wise. The Italian line dogs, I have not experienced cancer, and that's not to say that I won't. I just haven't experienced it with this particular bloodline yet. It is extremely hardy, extremely healthy, heart wise, so no cardio issues because it's an active working bloodline. They are selected on the most best actively working specimens. Hip dysplasia is another thing I'm going to knock on a hard fiber substance. Right now, in 15 years, I have not produced hip dysplasia. I have produced pano, but I have produced 2 cases of pano. One being a dog I have down in Georgia, and then of course one of my personal keepers from 2021 had pano growing up. And once they matured and they finished filling out, and I gave it some time, cut their weight back, did appropriate things, and worked with the vet. Pano completely disappeared. There's no more issues on both of these dogs. So that being said, if the worst thing that I've dealt with knocking a hard fiber substance so far has been pano, long story short, so the health issues, I've got my Italian male, Maui. He's 2018 model, so he's 6, going to be 7 this year. He's still not even gray in the face. He looks like he did at 2 years old. He's aging quite well. Has no health issues. He's not dysplastic. He hasn't been overworked to the point where his body has been completely run into the ground. He still acts like a 2-year-old. This dog can go from a standing position on all four and do a standing leap vertically of over 6 feet. So much agility to him and drive. He's one of the healthiest dogs that I have on my yard. He maintains his weight well. He handles the heat very well. And we get, I'll give you a good example. Last week we had 100-degree temps. Handled that heat extremely well. We went out swimming. We hosed all the dogs down. He bounced back quicker health wise just by hosing them down. Turned into a spring chicken. He was like a 2-year-old puppy again. Like he was bouncing around, going, "Hey, look, are we gonna play some more?" Because he was cooled off, getting himself all amped up. I ended up having to hose him off twice that particular day. And then like today example, we got excessive 87, 88 on the verge of 90 today. We took and hosed all the dogs down this morning. Everybody's all chilling. Everybody's got full water bins. Everybody's doing just fine with the double coat. So that's another health factor you got to take a look at. How does he handle the heat in the cold? This particular dog can handle sub-zero temperatures. Do I subject him to it all the time? No. But there's occasions where he has to go out, do his business. He'll be outside watching the livestock because that is his. Since I have retired him from personal protection work, he now has been fulfilling for about 5 years now a livestock guardian role or a property guardian, PVA property guardian role. If somebody comes near my goats, he barks and alerts me. If somebody comes onto my property, he barks and alerts me. He is ever watchful for anybody that gets within, and he does not bark unless you're within 10 feet of the property line. He will not bark at you unless you're in the immediate zone of the property. All right, I don't know how to explain it. He doesn't get the ice balls like you when you're out walking your dog in the middle of winter. Sometimes they get them ice balls in between their toes. Mm-hmm. He's never developed ice balls at all, period, in his life. Never developed ice balls because he's got such a heavy double coat. It doesn't look like he doesn't look wired hair or anything like that. He's just got a genuinely really thick coat. And for some reason, his coat is not coarse. It's extremely soft, especially in the winter. More coarse in the summer, but more soft in the winter because he's got all that extra fluff. These health aspects, I haven't dealt with any health issues in general so far, and I'm not on a hard fiber substance other than Pano with the Italian lines compared to the American lines. A lot of my 2014 productions that were solely American lines, predominantly almost all of those dogs are dead from cancer or heart attacks. There were 8 or 9 dogs produced in that particular litter. And there, to my knowledge, there's only 2 still surviving left of that. There's a male and a female still surviving off of that. There's Attila, and then there's a female owned by Dependable Auto, where she was sold to a towing company because they wanted basically a guardian dog for their tow company. So those are only 2 dogs left from that 2014 litter. My 2017 litter, there was only 1 production. She has now passed away from osteosarcoma. So to me, the health aspect is that brains is another difference of opinion when it comes to the Italian versus the American. The bounce back capability on stressful events that can make or break a dog and turn it into a fearful dog. They bounce back quicker. I've noticed they bounce back substantially quicker compared to some of my more heavier American line dogs. I have got to tread more carefully, and some of the American dogs, line dogs that I've worked with, you've got to tread real carefully and walk that fine line, because if you cross that fine line, you screw that dog up for life. The Italian lines, I notice, are more forgiving in that nature. They have a better bounce back capability than the Americans from what I've personally observed. Another factor is size, conformational size. definitely not the same compared to American bloodlines. American bloodline, it is not unheard of to have 150, 160, 170 pound dog that's 28 to 30 inches tall. It's not uncommon. As a matter of fact, it is a regular occurrence in American line dogs. With my Italian dogs, Maui is 26 inches tall, 26 and a half. He's a lot smaller than my one of my other foundation males. Okay. Rex is 28 and 3/4 inches and 137 pounds. Maui, on average, when he was much younger, maintained an average weight of 118 pounds. Now that he's a little bit older, he's just turned 7. Now that he's in a much older state, he maintains right around 122 to 125 on average. Very small compared to a lot of American productions. A lot of the Italian dogs that I have met personally, I have put hands on personally, because I have put my hands on at least 35 different Italian dogs here in the US, directly from Italy, whether it be from Maurizio Marziali, the breeder that we started with and purchasing from and importing from, to uh, Kenneth James and his productions, um, both mezzo Corso as well as authentically 100% Corso, in my opinion. When I say 100% Corso, I'm talking in theory that the dog looks the look, has the appropriate temperament. Basically, if it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So it fits all of these bills. Therefore, it's a Corso, in my opinion. I've had my hands on several different breedings by Kenneth James, um, Dr. Flavio Bruno. Uh, not It's not Carmen Ambrosio. That's his husband, Carmen Ambrosio. Carmen Ambrosio is the wife to the individual that I'm speaking of. I've seen several of his dogs in my travels in Canada. Um, I've met several of his dogs because a lot of his productions go over to Canada for some reason. Masseria Mocaro, I want to say it's called. He's got a famous dog in his kennel called Igor. Was one of offshoots off of Dr. Flavio Bruno, I do believe. One of the few registered specimens. I've had I've had Russian examples. It's Russian line, but they're Darian line dogs. I've dealt with some of his specimens, like personally, where I've seen them in hand. I'm not a big fan of the bloodlines. I won't touch it for my program myself, but that's not to say he doesn't produce good looking dogs. Absolutely phenomenal. So, in putting my hands between American dogs, Russian dogs, Italian dogs, the biggest thing, I stay away from Russian stock due to the brains. I've had Russian stock in the past, and the brains is not there. It's bred out. And there's a big analogy that is in the working dog community, period. Form follows function. Once you breed that functionality out, you cannot get it back. No matter how hard you try, you have a very low success rate of bringing that functionality back into the breed. So if you're not already starting with functional dogs, first and foremost, your health is going to go downhill. Second off, if they don't have the brains to do said job, what's the use of having the dogs? You see what I mean? I mean, there's huge differences between Italian line dogs, authentically Italian line dogs that are functional versus the average American dog. Health wise, temperament wise, character, their their demeanor, etc. When I take my Italian dogs, almost every response that I get, that's a Cane Corso. I don't get, hey, is that a bull mastiff? I don't get, hey, is that a boxer? I don't get these other breed names. Oh, hey, look, is that a colored Rottweiler? I don't get these uh, different breed discrepancies. Individuals know my Italian dogs is real deal Cane Corso. I've taken my American, uh, my half American, half Italian line dog out there, and because she looks like Orso, Bala Orso, or the hell was that? Bala Orso, I want to say it is, because she looks like that in phenotype. I've been asked several times, is she a band dog? Because they assume that she's not a purebred dog. If you do the DNA authentically, it's not one breed. Therefore, it is technically a band dog, but it is the mixing did not occur by my hands. Therefore, I had purchased a dog that is quote unquote authentically pure, registered, etc. Whether or not it's got hung papers is a whole different ballgame. DNA will tell once I DNA that particular dog. That F2, that's an F3 production, half Italian, half American lines. When I do the DNA, if the DNA does not line up with the pedigree, I will generally know if the pedigree is hung, and it's not by my hands. Okay, and that is one thing that I have to specify. I have not done any mixed breeding in my program. Period. Every specimen that I have used has been bought, purchased as a genuine Cane Corso. Okay. That's not to say papers aren't hung because we know it happens. Sometimes the papers are only about as good as wiping your ass with them. It is what it is. But it's registered as a Cane Corso. It walks the walk, quacks like a duck. It's supposed to be a Cane Corso, at least in my opinion. Therefore, continuing on to register as a Cane Corso, regardless of the DNA results. Even though we'll go back to Maui, his DNA lines up with his pedigree. He's got Chino in his pedigree. That's where the boxer comes from. If you take a look at the familial DNA, how it comes out, it's traced directly to Chino. The Bull Mastiff traces right back to his Umberto Leone lines because there's Umberto Leone in there, not too far from Chino. Then on the other side of the pedigree, the Neapolitan and Cane Corso, it all coincides together. They're two, basically what I would classify as sister breeds. Okay, a lot of people they would take their Neapolitan Mastiffs and cross them in when they wanted a dog that had more guardianship. Put the Abruzzese in when you wanted a dog to be more lax, more uh, farm oriented and people oriented. You wanted a more hunting dog, they threw the Italian Greyhound in for the Levieri type. Uh, More agile, more cat-like flexion, etc., more speed, more durability, tenacity, like the Italian Greyhounds. I mean, it really depended on the individual. So the lines that I focus on are heavy property guardian slash livestock guardianship roles for their dogs, as well as they do have a little bit of personal protection background. So that's specifically when I'm looking at my Italian lines, those are the three factors that I'm looking for. Do they have lines and workability doing property and livestock guardian roles? And have they done roles in their lineage? Has roles been performed for guardianship itself in general? We'll use the broad term of personal protection. This is absolutely key factor compared to the American lines. I have very few American line dogs that I've been able to take and work herding. I had several full American line dogs. I wasn't able to just throw them in a pen with goats like I can with my Italian dogs. without them going explosive trying to kill the animal. That workability has been bred out of those lines. It's very few and far between in the American versus the Italian, because in Italy they still use the dogs for traditional purposes. They originally, if you take a look at the fallacy, the original Roman war dog, and look further and deeper, what did they do before they were conscripted into the Roman as part of the Roman legions? Farmers. They were farmers, blacksmiths, tradesmiths, etc. Carpenters. Everybody had a dog. Butchers, you name it. They all had dogs. They all intermingled to make the Cane Corso. Plain and simple. Like I was saying, absolutely imperative for any Cane Corso enthusiast to get both books, the Il Cane Corso books by Fernando Casalino and Stefano Gandolfi, and the Il Cane Corso by Dr. Flavio Bruno. Major breed historian preservationists. Read this stuff. It's got documentation in there, temperament documentation, information about SAC when it formed, predating American stuff. Like Italian preservation predates American preservation, no matter how anybody wants to spin it. SAC was formed before Mike Sotilli Sr. formed the FIC, before it was even called the Cane Corso, when he originally called the Cane Corso the Sicilian Bronchiero. I'm not going to debate in that theology, but these books have a wealth of knowledge and information that are backed up with citations and actual legitimate facts. Is it the gospel? No. It is not 100% gospel, but they have a lot of facts that are backed up. It ultimately boils back to an individual to decide, as much as I hate to say this, what they think is a genuine Corso. But here's my unadulterated opinion. You can have an American line Corso, yes. But to have a authentically true Cane Corso in the purest form, it needs to have Italian blood of some form in it. And it should be up close, not 8, 10, 12 generations back. There should be something up close, unless those breeders have produced 8 to 10 generations forward that are still maintaining those, and it's got marginal outcrossing, which is few and far between. You don't find a lot of breeders like that. You don't find a lot of breeders that are focused on building their own bloodline, and they're continuing from their source. They're also not giving their sources credit. First and foremost, that's another issue that we have within the breed, is people not giving credit to the sources where they obtain their specimens, and then giving themselves credit on their productions. Because once you start getting into F2s, F3s, F4s, that's a lot of years. That's a lot of time. That wasn't the other breeder that did this. That was all that individual. So my biggest advice is keep track of all that. Show proof and do a due diligence. In my opinion, and this is backed up with what I have observed personally with my Italian line productions, as well as observation of other people's productions in Italian line dogs. The versatility is much larger with Italian dogs on usage, whether it be hunting, whether you're using your dogs for hunting, whether it be coyotes for predator eradication, bear baying, hog hunting, etc., hunting in general, to herding / droving, because the Cane Corso is not a herder by nature. It is a drover. Property guardianship, fulfilling a dual purpose role of deterring people and unwanted animals from entering a property. Livestock guardianship, where That dog fulfills the role of protecting a flock, a herd, etc., or a group of animals from predators or thieves in general. Actual personal protection, guardianship in general. That's 5 jobs right there. I can't get a lot of American dogs to do that many tasks or have that versatility to fill multiple roles. Matter of fact, I've got a higher aptitude of service animal production when it comes to my Italian lines versus American lines. And when I say service work, uh, I have a higher success rate of selecting a genuine specimen that has the appropriate temperament and brains and capability of performing a role as a service animal or ESD role, emotional support dog. They have such a larger potential versatility for that with my Italian line versus the American line.
So the argument really isn't, from your perspective, isn't that these dogs don't come from similar beginnings. It's just the genetics that were used and molded into what we call the Cane Corso today. It's more about the overall breeding perspectives and practices that the Italians have versus what the Americans had, and the continuance of them paying attention to the finer detail compared to what we see today. But it's not that say that people that are American line Corsos aren't doing that today, aren't being as conscientious as the Italians are or were, but they're both, it seems like both sides have kind of this unscrupulous background as far as paper hanging and
It happened
false
on both sides of the fence. But
falsities and kind of this overall mythology that doesn't really follow the reality of what the breed has become. And I heard Reggie Ironstone say this once during kind of a heated conversation, and it kind of stuck with me. And I agree with what he said 100%. He said that he says it doesn't matter what happened 50, 40, 30 years ago. What matters is now, and these dogs are a breed now, and we should focus on the now and the future. And that's what he's trying to preserve, and that's what he was trying to convey to the people that he was having this conversation with. And I agree with that, like, because I'm not a purist, and I think people that can build upon a creation or develop a dog themselves, I think it's a little futile if you don't have the numbers. I think Corsos are much more a more realistic idea of what a breed is. I look at the American Bullies, and I don't consider that a breed at all yet. And but um, besides the point, I just think that here's where we're at. The Cane Corso is a breed. The Italian dogs are a breed. The American dogs are a breed. It's just the avenues and the styles that people are going down that are different. And
there's even science that backs it up. Okay, there was a Italian study called the Genome Project for
yeah,
Cane Corso.
yeah.
All right, it clearly shows that the Cane Corso has its own unique haplotype, and it clades the Italian and the American in their own 2 different clades. With the main composition of the American Cane Corso comprising of Neapolitan Mastino, Rottweiler, Pit Bull, and a smidgen of Cane Corso. While the Italian is Cane Corso, Neapolitan Mastino, Bull Mastiff, and Boxer. Do I necessarily agree with that? No. I mean, it is what it is. We can't. I'm trying to think of the way I've said this for years is I agree with Reggie's sentiment 1000%. However, with that being said, we have to understand the past in order to provide a better future. Understanding the mistakes that were made hanging of papers, the genetics that were added in order to appropriately. You got to look at the front side of the dog in the pedigree. Okay, we'll say a rough general. We'll say the pedigree is actually accurate, and then you got to look at the backside. You got to know what's in there in that back that has carried forward genetically, whether it's these health issues. I'll give you a good ideal. All my dogs are testing negative for what is this DSRA, whatever this new bullshit is. All my dogs are negative for that. Um, I've also in my particular Italian lines, I know for a fact there's certain dogs that test for genetic myelopathy. My dogs are all clear of that. That's another thing that you guys got to you got to look at. You got to look at the past. Okay, it's got this influence in there. How do I breed it today to produce the next best quality specimen? It's not just going based off looks, temperament, and stuff. It's also what's hidden genetically. A good example is I stay away from sable genetics. When staying away from that sable coloration, I haven't produced any black and tans in any of my productions because I specifically stay away from sable genetics. Because, like Merle can be cryptid, sable can hide black and tan genetics. It's almost guaranteed you got the AT-AT gene attached to a sable colored dog. They look black, but authentically they're not black. It's basically a seal color with red highlights. Anybody that is listening to both sides and looking at this through a open mindset can see both valid points, because in order to provide a better future you got to understand the past. Once you understand the past, if you've got certain issues that are popping up, you should in theory be able to formulate a plan on how to correct those issues, whether you call the line completely or hey look, I need to breed to such and such type of dog with this particular genetics in order to try and move away from these genetics. I mean, it's pretty it's 1,000% spot on with Reggie's analogy. And the only thing that I would add in there is that it is imperative to know. It cannot be completely disregarded what happened in the past. It has to be, in order to provide a better future, you got to understand what happened. And it's to the point where we're not going to get admission on what happened because a lot of these old heads are dying off. Okay. We're looking right now 40, 50 years after the main initial recovery period. A lot of these breeders that were original preservationists, whether it be American or Italian, they're dying off. They're either doing deathbed details like Umberto Leone did, or they're taken to their grave.
And for me, this is where my argument is on both sides of the spectrum. Maybe even a little bit more on the Italian lines, because people kind of mythologize those dogs a little bit more in some regards, even though what you have explained during our time here is exactly the kinds of things that I understand your perspective, and I 100% can identify with what you're saying. My difference is like, I think the problem is that you get people that mythologize these dogs and try to create a backstory and just kind of a falsity, and give them a uh, kind of a unicorn description. And these dogs are just dogs, and they have good qualities and bad qualities. And what preservation breeders like yourself are trying to do or build upon the good qualities and to promote the breed in a way that's what's in front of us, not what some book says or what some mythology description is like, I hear it so much in the bull breed world. Like it gets nauseating. Like about this bloodline that and this bloodline this, and you hear it in the American Pit Bull Terrier world, and then you realize that a lot of these people were out crossing and paper hanging and or their genetics were so poorly.
Or
Uh,
the Chevy bloodlines being severely tainted with DDB.
Yeah, and then or they die off at 5 years old. Sure, they're full pedal to the metal, but at 5 years old they die of cancer. So, as a consumer, as a dog lover, I don't look at that as success. I look at that as a complete failure, and I don't need your falsities and your mythology
Exactly.
behind it. I just want realism, and I'm looking at the dogs in front of me, and I am judging on that. And yes, I want to know the reality of the background because, like you said, it better gives you the ability to correct any mistakes and build upon and the successes. You can't do that with bullshit lies. You can't do that with mythology. The
No,
Roman war dog, you know what I mean? I don't wanna hear that shit as a consumer. It's all bullshit to me, you know what I mean? It's like the English Mastiff being, in the front of the lines of all these battles. No, it's not. It's a recreation dog. It's not even the same dog. It's built off of multiple genetics of dogs that we have today. The English Mastiff is not the English Mastiff
it's
of
not
s
the
s
Mastiff Britannia
yeah,
of
it's
old.
far from that
Just, like-
nowadays. And so I
just
don't
like the
need to
Cane Corso is not the Canis pugnacis.
let's get over it. Yeah, let's study the history and let's honor that and enjoy those stories and stuff like that, but it's not the reality of today, and that's the crux of my issue. And it just seems to be more of a used car salesman pitch to justify $5,000 price tags on um, half-assed dogs, and I don't like that about these popular breeds like French bulldogs, Cane Corsos, and American Bullies. It encompasses just more and more paper hanging, the more lies, the more BS to line the pocketbooks of the top 1% of these breeders that are making true profits, and we don't need that anymore. We need good dogs for good people, and if that means that the top 1% don't profit as much as they used to, so be it.
I don't make a huge amount of money.
Oh, well,
I
yeah,
barely
Aaron.
I barely break even. I
But
think
you,
the
but,
highest I've ever sold a dog for, I think, was $4,200, and that was including shipping, if I'm not mistaken.
and you look at the top 1%, whoever it may be, they came in it with more than what most came in it with. They have the infrastructure. You people that are thinking about breeding or you're starting out now, you're never going to have that infrastructure. You're never going to have that time. You're never going to have that ability to throw money at, at, at every little thing like these people do. They have different scenarios, and so I think we watch these YouTube videos and we watch these people that are making six figures plus a year on these dogs. That's not the reality, and
Mm-mm,
the reality is also that they're not breeding. They're not conscientious breeders. They're not breeding good dogs
mm-mm.
most of the time, and so let's forget about those people and let's forget about the mythology and let's focus on.
How many breeders out there actually focus on their puppies, both genetics as well as temperament and socialization training? As I was stating earlier, my puppies start their house training at 3.5 weeks. As soon as they start leaving the nest, I already start my house training at 3.5 weeks. In between that 3.5 week and 5 week stage, I start them on a puppy mush. Okay. I start teaching them to seek other food options other than mommy's boob. At 5 weeks of age is when I start working on their food drive, because usually between 3.5 to 5 weeks, they're now eating solid foods appropriately. I can feed them by 5 weeks of age. They got enough teeth in where I can feed them. I go out and I get those little diced pieces of ham. those pre-diced packages of Hormel ham that are they're little small chunks that you would throw into like pasta salad and stuff. Absolutely phenomenal training tool. Absolutely phenomenal. Take that and start working them on their come command. And as soon as they come, give them their reward. That establishes that solid foundation of that recall. That if I go out in the yard and I give that command, come here, puppy, 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 because I use a versatile command for the entire group and always usually have them out in a group before I start doing their solo work. Getting them all to come together as a group, getting them all to sit together as a group, feeding them all together in a group without any complaints or grumbles or gripes, working with them on if they need that extra work of food possessiveness, etc. That's all got to be worked on beforehand. They are at such a young age, it's just like a child. A child between the ages of 2 and 6 absorb the most. So that is when you cram the education in there, because it creates that foundation for later in life, that ethic. You instill that work ethic then, you instill that education then, and then you will end up with a great obedient dog that, you know, you run it through when you go to do your feed times, you run it through an obstacle course where it's got all of these different environmental stimuli. A gun goes off, they're not going to be running to hide under the couch. Notice this with American lines. My American line dogs do not keep their litter areas as clean as my Italian dogs have done. Therefore, leading to house training issues with some of my American line dogs. Is it able to be gotten through? Absolutely. With the right training and the right patience, most situations are entirely workable and you can get through them. But how many of these breeders, these other big name breeders out there, how many actively work with their puppies at this young of an age? That's the biggest thing. How many of them actually work with their puppies to do this? My pups don't leave till they're usually right around 15 weeks, which is the reason why I charge a higher price than most average breeders out there for my pet quality dogs. You know, $3,400 to $3,800 is what I charge. And then I also charge gas costs if they're out of state, because I refuse to use shipping companies, because bad things have happened through shipping companies in the past. I charge them my fuel rate. That's it. I don't charge them my time. I charge them the cost of fuel to go to and from destination. That's it. So I'm not making a killing, you know, selling my dogs, transporting my dogs. I'm just making sure they get from point A to point B. My clients have to be happy. Second off, the dogs have to be happy. Okay, those are the two most important parts when it comes to breeding, at least in my perspective. These things, you know, how many of these big name breeders are actually focused on this? How many reach out yearly to check on all of their productions? I've got updated pictures on all of my productions except for my 2014 litter, because 90% of that litter is dead. What am I to do then? You know, I keep track of this, you know, what their death rate, so I know what to fix in my program for longevity, you know, because that's another concern within the breed itself, with this being the last coursing mastiff, is the longevity. Because as we all know, large breed, like, average lifespan is 7 to 11 years. And that's the updated lifespan. On average, they say, what is it, 9 to 10 years was the old standard. But if you look at today's market across all these breeds, the average lifespan is anywhere from 7 to 11 years, with the occasional offshoot being in the teens. And that's the rarity offshoot. So how many of these breeders are actually focusing on all of this between the socialization, training, longevity. As you stated, half of them don't even bother with this. They're just pumping the dogs out. Boiling back to what you just said, we need to get more individuals together to have these open debates. It is absolutely imperative that we have everybody's opinion, as well as the facts behind that opinion in order in communication. We also need, as a community, to provide better communication with new aspiring breeders instead of dogging them out, ultimately pushing them to bad decisions. That is a huge problem, a huge detriment I have seen within the breed. That is why I'm so open about educating anybody and everybody that wants that education. If they come to me and say, hey, look, what do I do about this? I don't say, well, you ain't got a dog for me. I'm not helping you. Or you pay me and I'll give you my info. Information should be free. It should be knowledge that should be shared on, not spit out false misinformation. That is huge and rampant in the breed, with the throwing out a lot of false information about who would have done it, kind of deal.
Mm.
So it's absolutely imperative that we get more people communicating with each other openly, as well as doing it without it turning into a huge bash session, so to speak. That is the key factor, is that this community has not been real successful. I'm talking about the Corso community in general.
Mm-hmm.
Has not been successful about that, including my small community with the TCCR. We still got, oh, all the Italians are the best thing since sliced bread, or oh no, it's Americans. Americans are the ones that truly recovered the breed. Da, 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 da. It's a lot of back and forth, and they take the preservation aspect out of it, of preserving. You got your American dogs that need protection and preservation, just like your Italian dogs need your protection and preservation, just like both sides of the fence need to amicably come together and educate one another, because somebody on the American side could have documentation that I don't have access to, that I should have access to. Well, versus I've got access to documentation, maybe they haven't ordered any of these books and don't know about any of these historical writings, etc. That predate, in the 1500s. You don't see Neapolitan written in the 1500s. You see that in the early 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s is how far back you see the Neapolitan handwritings. Okay. You see Cane Corso going back all the way to 1530 AD. And there's documentation, by Plato, of all things, by Plato, to back that up. So whether it's true or not, that's a whole different ballgame, but there's still evidence nonetheless. And that's where both sides need to collectively come together, have these topics of discussions, these hard discussions that nobody can seem to manage to have, and have it amicably without it turning into a bash session. I mean, that's absolutely key in educating new aspiring breeders or preservationists, our future generation.